I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening. Members present this evening are myself, Mayor Morrow, Council Members Gearboss, CO, Mitchell, Mayor Pro Tem Tahar, and Councilwoman Dillon. From City Staff, we have City Manager Campbell, Clerk Royal, Treasurer Bennett, Police Chief Rennick, DPW Director Fordyce. I don't believe Mr. Rubel is here. City Attorney Smith, as well, I believe Steve Gerard, our labor attorney, had to leave. The rest of you who are present this evening, we welcome you, and we would encourage you to sign in the back to my left, if you would be so kind. And at this time, the chair would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as amended. I believe you are going to request a change, Councilwoman Mitchell, is that correct?
That's correct. I would like to strike item 17-123, the electronics policy, from an action item and move it to discussion tonight, please.
So the motion on the floor by Councilwoman Mitchell to approve the agenda as amended, noting that one change. Are there additional changes? Is there a second to Ms. Mitchell's motion? Seconded by Councilmember Gearbaugh. Hearing no discussion, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. Councilwoman McClellan may be able to join us this evening, so we will skip excusing her absence, at the moment, and if she's unable to attend this evening, we'll entertain that towards the conclusion of tonight's meeting. At this time, we come to one presentation, which is a proclamation for Kevin Cornell. Police Chief Rennick, would you like to come to the podium and begin this evening?
Sure. Well, thank you. You know, it's always sad and happy at the same time to say goodbye to a long-term employee. Kevin Cornell has been with the department for over 30 years. When I first started here 5.5 years ago, I learned that he was an EMS instructor, and of course I'm an EMS instructor, and so we had a special bond, and we were able to have different classes and stuff that we went together. So I'm going to miss him. He's been a dispatcher, and I think, Mayor, I think you have a resolution that you have for him. So I'll let you read the resolution, then we as a department have something for him afterwards.
Excellent. Kevin, congratulations.
Thank you, sir.
Well, let me just say this. Police Chief Rennick is absolutely correct. He's spot on. Mr. Cornell has been an outstanding employee of the Saline Police Department for several decades. He is a solid dispatcher and an outstanding presence in the department, and he will be missed, although his commitment to preserving public safety will continue. Many of you know Kevin is a full-time employee of the Saline Area Fire Department, and as you would expect, he does an outstanding job there as well. And I'm proud to say that Kevin is not just a colleague, but a friend, and I had the great distinction and honor of presiding over the marriage of he and his wife, who's in the audience this evening. Why don't you raise your hand? Thank you for being here. We appreciate that very much. Kevin, I'm not going to read this in its entirety, but I did want to give you a letter of recognition, again, for the outstanding job that you've done as both a part-time and full-time dispatcher for the Saline Police Department beginning in 1987. We appreciate your efforts very much. We wish you the best, and congratulations.
Thank you, sir. And Kevin, we've made it a tradition to award our employees. First of all, a retirement ID for you.
Thank you, sir.
And then we also have a dispatcher badge.
Oh, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Congratulations.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I wasn't told I needed to present anything.
Don't need to say a thing. No.
You know what? You'd think a dispatcher would have a lot to say.
You would. Thank you again, Kevin. Appreciate your service. Okay, moving on the agenda, we come to citizen comments on agenda items. Under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time, make comment or question on an item that appears on this agenda. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record.
Mary Hess, and I'm speaking on the agenda item of discussion regarding the 425 proposal with Saline Township. There have been many comments, and I've driven through the mobile home park and the other big homes that have been built there. And I notice they have fire hydrants, and of course the city of Saline does not service them. But I remember years ago on city council, we had a big interest in water pressure. And Abe Mupfa was our city engineer, and we were checking hydrants, or they was, the city, and we had problem with water pressure. Water pressure is very important for fires. And I want to make sure that while they're addressing other things, that the water pressure be double checked. And also, as far as the disposal, I don't think the mobile home park will be able to handle this. I don't see US 12 allowing the street to be tore up to bring the lines over. The mobile home people, modular, I don't know what the new word is, but anyway, they have a lot of concerns because they're having trouble right now with the water, the quality, and having it. And also they've had trouble with their disposal. Apparently they hadn't even been approached as far as what this proposal is. And I had suggested maybe the township could have this on display, or this proposal on display at the office of who it's going to impact, and also here. I definitely feel that it's no win at all for the city of Saline, and definitely I'm opposed to it. Thank you.
Additional citizen comments on agenda items, please.
John Olson, Saline Area Chamber of Commerce. I just wanted to say I see a couple of long-standing items that have been hanging out there for a long time going to closing tonight, and I'm very excited to see that, and it's good to see these projects be able to move forward, and let's move them on and get these businesses and homes up and running. Thanks.
Thank you. One last call. Any additional citizen comments? Please, Mr. Grossman.
Eric Grossman, Saline Township, Macon Road. This is in regards to the 425 agreement, which I think is a good concept and should receive deliberate and thoughtful consideration. It does need work. Take your time and ask questions. That's why you're up here. Developing this parcel has been going on for over a decade, and if you're told that you don't act quickly, they will build in the township. Remember, you're not buying a used car. They could build now, and they came to the city and they much rather build in town. I have over 35 years experience working for the city of Saline, and not offering full city services in the past has caused problems. And the issue here, I think, is mostly with the water. The water and sewer are a separate charge. They'll be getting substandard water from other citizens, no RO filtered water. They'll all need water softeners, possible iron stains on their houses from the irrigation, drives, sidewalks, and things like that. So they're going to come back about that. They care more about the water coming into the house than the water going out, i.e. the sewer. And the 425 agreement talks a lot about the city not having any responsibility for the sewer plant and its operations and any problems that may arise. It's not the city's problem, but I think you want to do just the opposite. This plant is on US 12 upwind from the city. If the developer increases capacity, I think you should get equal percentage oversight on how that plant is run. You don't need to get into the day-to-day operations, let them run the plant as they see fit. But you want an active participation, not paperwork saying they meet state standards. If you, the council, are going to increase the size of the sewage plant, which is upwind of the city, then you must have some kind of control and not legal action like you took with the DPW roof approach. Do you want a plant that meets state standards upwind from the city or a plant that meets city standards? Webster Environmental, that was hired by the city for the Monroe Street sewer plant, had this to say about the treatment plant on Monroe. Relative to other plants tested by Webster Environmental, odors from the Saline plant were found to be low to moderate. That sounds like state standards to me. So when a billowing cloud of hydrogen and gas comes down 12, do you want your name assigned to that? I don't think so. So I think deliberate and take your time, and don't be in a rush for this, please.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Mr. Grossman. Additional citizen comments on agenda items? No, but we thank you all. We'll proceed to the consent agenda. The following consent agenda will normally be adopted without discussion. However, at the request of any citizen or council member, any item may be removed from the consent agenda for council discussion.
Move to approve as submitted.
Second.
Moved by Mayor Pro Tem Tahar to approve as submitted and seconded by Councilman Gearbaugh. Hearing no discussion, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda as submitted signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to unfinished business, item 15-194. This is block party permit. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the memo dated July 26, 2017 from Clerk Royal and to approve and adopt or not to approve the changes to the block party permit. Is there a motion?
I'll move to acknowledge.
Thank you, Councilwoman Dillon. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Gearbaugh. Clerk Royal, do you want to go over your memo of July the 26th? Yes, please be sure to speak into the microphone.
Yes, the block party permit changes were brought to City Council back in 2015. The changes would allow for the city manager or his designee to sign off on block party permits. At that time, council requested additional information on the permit. One was a definition of the block party as opposed to a community event. The second requirement was a requirement for a porta-john and the reason why they would need insurance. These items have been addressed and the city's alcohol ordinance has been included as number 6 on the signature requirement page. So I'm asking City Council's approval for the changes.
Very good. Thank you, Clerk Royal. Ms. Dillon, did you have any questions?
I did. I have a few,
Please.
please. On the first page, we talked about it just defining it just as just residents. And then under purpose, it talks about citizen groups or nonprofit organizations. If we're getting into nonprofits, doesn't that turn it over to more of a community event?
What I was told by the city attorney is if they're having like a block party that includes a graduation party, you might be having other people who are involved. And that's like they said that the insurance requirement would be for something like a dunk tank, so that if you were having a dunk tank in the street, you would need insurance requirements. So I think that they're talking about having people or agencies outside of just the people that are there.
I'm not sure I understand.
Is that, you're correct, Ms. Dillon. That respectfully, and I
Oh,
understand,
no,
I understand
okay.
your perspective, but that still wouldn't apply. We still wouldn't need to use the terminology nonprofit.
Okay.
That'd be my opinion.
Where was that at, Janet?
It's in the, on block priority policy, it's number 1 purpose.
But in some cases, I think the thinking was that in some cases, you may have a neighborhood association or other group that's sponsoring it. You might have a church group sponsoring a block party. You might have another group involved. So it's not a community event. It's a smaller group, but it might be sponsored by somebody other than a group of neighbors.
Okay. That makes sense, Ms. Dillon.
It does, it just sort of seems like it's just muddy in the waters as to why it wouldn't just say citizen group. But if that's legal counsel's opinion, then that's what we'll go with there. I just wanted to make sure that it was clarified about that. And then we talk about I'm on the policy page, on number 3, under application procedure, it's 14 days. The application needs 14 days to be submitted. Don't we generally do 45 days for community events ones? So are we shortening this for some reason?
Well, under this policy, the city manager would be able to approve it. right now, community events have to come before city council, and they have to be looked at by our DPW director, the fire chief, and the police chief. So that's the reason why we give 45 days before it comes to council. We need to do some background check. This one would be just a simple block party, just the closing of the streets.
Okay, so I guess that would segue actually to my next question, which is that with the city manager approving, does that remove the police chief and fire chief also?
No.
Okay. Okay, that's fine.
I think, if I may, Ms. Dillon, I think.
Sure.
I think the extended period of time for a community event really is to accommodate city council, not so much staff.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fine. That's fine. Under requirements, under A, let's see, it says the block party areas shall be vacated prior to that time. Well, the time is blank, but they have to leave before their time is up?
Well, we asked them to give us a time period so that we know when the street will be reopened.
Right. I guess it's just sort of funky wording, I guess. I'm just being sort of a nitpicker. This is
No,
what I
that's
do.
fine. But each time it's going to be different, too. It might be a 2-hour party. Some places might have 4-hour parties.
Right. Okay, that's fine. Now, Public Works, we are not charging people for DPW time in delivering and picking up?
Not for a block party.
Not for a block party, we're not going to do that? Okay, I thought we had talked about possibly doing that with the last one. Then, as far as the addresses for people, is there any methodology, and this is probably where the city manager or legal counsel would have, as to a percentage of people that have to agree to this to close the road?
Yeah, I mean, typically you want to see majority, and hopefully it's more than majority, you know, and that if, for instance, if it came across my desk and there was, you know, 52% of the people said yes, and my first question is, what about the other ones, right? That's a pretty split. Why the other half? You know, why did they not? Were they not home? Were they not? You know, I want to make sure that I want to know why. Now, if it comes back and if there's 50 people on the street and 3 people aren't signed down there, then, you know, I'm probably going to say, hopefully you can, if those 3 people, who knows why they're not there, but I think it needs to speak. I mean, to me, that's the using good judgment. I would hope to determine that.
That's fine. I was just wondering, I know that in the past we've seen somewhere there's several blanks where, you know, nobody answered the door or that sort of thing, so I just didn't know how far we have to take it. There was no mention in this about obstructing the roadway. Do we need to make mention of that since it became an issue with the last?
We certainly could, because essentially they need to be able to get first responder public safety vehicles, right? If they need to access a site, they they can't be having to relocate a tent or some heavy objects. They need to be at maximum, they need to just be able to throw a barricade out of the way.
Right. I think it might be nice to be able to put that in there so that it's clear to people.
Sure.
And I have one last question, I promise.
Real
And
quick
that-
though, Ms. Dillon, your suggestion, your last suggestion, I think that change can be made without objection. Is there any objection from the dais? No objection, that change will be made. Please continue.
Thank you. Goes back to first page on definition of block party, and it says it's not open to the public, just the residents of that particular street. That language seems wrong because then if we're talking graduation parties, these are not residents.
Yes, and that's why they would, a graduation party would have to fill out a community event from here on out. Once this would be adopted, this would be, a block party would just be the residents of the street.
Okay, so that's what this is going to be. So
Yes.
anything else now has to use the other form?
Correct.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Thank you for
Just
all
for,
my questions.
if I could,
Yes.
just for clarification, Clerk Royal, the the example that Mr. Smith used, which I thought was reasonable for like if a organization, I think he used it as an example of a church utilizing a block party. Would that still fit underneath this definition? So I guess maybe that question is actually for Mr. Smith.
If it's truly just a church, it would be, I guess, the members of the church who would normally attend and use their parking lot to park, and you might block off a street as they invite the neighbors to also participate. The graduation events, again, if it's just at somebody's house and you're not asking to block off a street, that's fine. When you're asking to block off a street or engage in a wider community solicitation, that's different.
Thank you.
Mr. Hart, did you have some questions?
Already answered, thank you.
Excellent. Additional questions, Ms. Mitchell?
I just wanted to look at the front page, item 4, no alcoholic liquor on the street. It talked about having this item moved to the signature page,
Yes.
but because I am a human being, I noticed that on the signature page itself, that item isn't highlighted, it's on the back of it. And I'm just imagining, my neighbor coming to me with a clipboard and not understanding there's something on the reverse. And I would ask my council members, or you, Ms. Royal, is it of value to just put a footer on the page with that reminder?
I think
Yes.
that can be made without objection.
Okay,
Yep.
that's all I have.
Very good. Additional questions for city staff or legal counsel?
Just a clarification.
Please, Mr. Gearbaum.
What do we define as a city street? Is it the intersection or is it the entire street? Example of, say, West McKay wants to have a party. Does it stop at Lewis Street or does it need to go further on to Ann Arbor Street? It's just trying to define where do you have the boundaries of a street.
From my perspective, it would be the right-of-way from sidewalk to sidewalk, and as far as at an intersection, if it included an intersection, now I can tell you, McKay, for example, we're not going to allow that intersection at North Ann Arbor to be included, right? 'Cause it's a
Right, no, I know that, but I'm talking about who has to sign this document, because that would mean I'd have to have every single house on McKay Street from Mills to Lewis to sign, even if I'm only going to close off the north portion or the east portion of McKay Street.
Well, it would be the
West McKay.
right, it would be the boundaries. From my perspective, you'd say from North Ann Arbor to Lewis Street. North Lewis, does that make sense?
So if that section,
Yes, yes.
That's what I'm
It would be the section, the two end boundaries.
okay. I just want to clarify, because then you could potentially end up having to have a whole lot more signatures.
Right, correct.
And I'm glad that there is that portion about having to list every address on the street and sign it, because I think that's the check and balance against having any group come into town that would want to use one of our city streets and just not necessarily be a resident or whatever. Thank you.
Additional questions? No, then we have a motion on the floor moved by Dillon, seconded by Gearbaugh to acknowledge receipt. All those in favor of acknowledging receipt signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. Is there a motion now to approve and adopt the changes to the block party permit?
Move to approve and adopt.
Moved by Gearbaugh, seconded by CO to approve and adopt, noting the changes that were made during our discussions without objection. Discussion. Then we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor of approving and adopting signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business item 17-124, noting that we have struck the electronic use policy from new business to the discussion portion of our agenda. And the motion that we're now entertaining will be a motion to purchase DPW pickup truck. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the memo dated July 21st, 2017 from DPW Director Fordyce, and to approve or not to approve the purchase of a 2017 Ford F-350 four-wheel drive pickup truck from Varsity Ford in Ann Arbor, Michigan, in the amount of $28,326.
Move to acknowledge and approve.
Thank you, Councilwoman Mitchell. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Tahar. Mr. Fordyce, the floor is yours.
Thank you.
This item was included in the FY18 budget. The proposed truck will replace a 1999 Ford F-250 that will take offline and auction. We have typically purchased F-250s for our general pickup trucks. You also use them for plowing. This time we've upgraded to an F-350 because we have a piece of equipment that needs to be trailered to job sites, and currently the only vehicles we have capable of towing it are our large dump trucks. So we've upgraded this one to an F-350 so we have the additional towing capacity to move that piece of equipment.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Fordyce. Are there questions for our DPW director? Ms. Dillon.
Is there a reason that you're not getting the plow now?
We typically, in the past, we have bid the plow installed with the trucks. Our new mechanic suggested we buy it separately and we install it in-house. We could save the installation costs. But additionally, we were looking for a little bit of budget flexibility where we might be purchasing a different piece of equipment other than the plow at this time and then get the plow in a subsequent year.
That segues into my next question was, did you not need it at this time?
So we have, with the existing equipment we have and the way winters have gone recently, we have sufficient plow capacity with our existing pickup truck fleet. So this will be kind of, we need the new pickup truck because the other one's old and worn out, but we have sufficient plowing capacity with the rest of our fleet. But then going forward, this will be an ideal vehicle to put a plow on when the next plow pickup truck retires.
Thank you.
Additional questions for Mr. Fordyce? Any subsequent discussion? No, then there's a motion on the floor moved by Mitchell, seconded by Tar to acknowledge receipt and to approve. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Fordyce. We move on to new business item 17-125. This is 2017 Leadership Training Agreement. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the Leadership Training Agreement and to approve or not to approve a one-year agreement between the City of Saline and the Coalition for Quality Community in the amount of $1,000.
Move to acknowledge and approve.
Thank you, Councilwoman Mitchell. Is there a second? Seconded by Tahar. Thank you, ma'am. Clerk Royal, do you want to make a comment about this?
Well, this is something that had been brought by Councilmember Rhodes back in the past, and it's an annual agreement, and so, and it's for the training, Saline Leadership, and it's a wonderful opportunity. I've been through it, and I'm requesting City Council to approve it.
No, it's essentially, some of you may recall, providing a service to help develop future leaders for the community. That's what the agreement is with the Saline Leadership Institute.
Questions for city staff?
Just one.
Please, Mr. Kirby.
On the average, how many city staff do we run through this?
Typically, it's 2. This year, I think, I believe at least 2, possibly 3.
Okay, thank you.
Additional questions? Mr. Hart.
Not a question, but a comment of support. I think this is a program that many people sitting here at the dais have participated in, and also a number of members of the audience as well. I think it's a very valuable program, great learning opportunity, also an opportunity to develop a base of people out in the community that you know that you might not normally have the opportunity to get to know and build relationships with. So it's very valuable in many ways, and I would encourage people to consider participating as well. I'm very much in favor of this motion.
Very good. Subsequent discussion? No, then there's a motion on the floor moved by Mitchell, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Tahar to acknowledge receipt and to approve. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business item 17-126. This is charitable gaming license for Saline Area Social Services. This is a motion to acknowledge receipt of the memo dated July 20th, 2017 from Jamail Eakins, Executive Director of the Saline Area of Saline Area Social Services, requesting that Saline Area Social Services be recognized as a nonprofit organization operating in the community to be eligible to apply for a charitable gaming license from the state of Michigan, and to approve and adopt or not to adopt the local governing body resolution for charitable gaming licenses, recognizing Saline Area Social Services as a nonprofit organization operating in the city of Saline for the purposes of obtaining a charitable gaming license.
Move to acknowledge, approve, and adopt.
Second?
Yeah, I know. I was wondering what that was.
Was that?
That was a cell phone
Cell phone,
ringtone.
excuse me. I heard Mr. Seal's voice and then poultry.
Well, I know the community
So,
fair's coming up, so I
How
wasn't
long
sure
is this
what-
meeting anyway?
That was a first. My apologies. Who was the second for that? Is that Mitchell? Okay. We have a motion on the floor properly moved by CO, seconded by Mitchell, to acknowledge receipt and to approve and adopt. Before we get to staff, Mr. Akins, who does a marvelous job as the Executive Director of Saline Area Social Services, is with us. Jamil, would you like to make a comment on this?
No, I think you've stated everything.
Okay. Would you like to make a comment on this?
It's pretty cut and dry.
Okay. Are there questions for either city staff or for the applicant? Ms. Dillon?
So you just have to fill this out once, and then every time you want a license, it's on file, correct? Or do you have to come back to us? It was very confusing when I was trying to navigate the state of Michigan's website on gaming and raffles. I'm just trying to, for your benefit, do you only have to come to us once for this, or every time you want to do a 50?
I don't know the answer to that question.
I do.
I'll know before next year.
It's good for 7 years.
Oh,
Good.
There we go.
Thank you.
Additional questions, Ms. Dillon?
No, thank you.
Additional questions from the dais? Subsequent discussion? No, then it's been properly moved by CO, seconded by Mitchell, to acknowledge receipt and to approve and adopt. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, motion carries unanimously. Jamil, thank you very much for your time. Hopefully, this will be an additional tool in your toolbox to raise funds to support those in need in our community. Appreciate it very much. Have a good evening. We move on to new business item 17-127. This is Saline Community Fair Community Event Application Update. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the letter dated July 6, 2017 from Saline Fair Board Director Leslie Drake, and to approve or not to approve the request to set the date and time for the 2017 Saline Fair Parade to be Tuesday, August 29th at 6:30 p.m. and to waive or not to waive the showmobile rental fee of $1,600. Is there a motion?
I'll move to acknowledge the receipt right now for discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Gearba. Is there a second to acknowledging receipt?
Second?
Seconded by Ms. Dillon. Thank you for being here.
Hi.
We would welcome a comment, and then we will open it up for questions.
The Saline Fair Board would just request City of Saline support again this year. Again, we're having the parade back in the city limits. We'll do that as long as we can and hope to have participation for you guys to help us out with some cost savings that go along with that. It'll be reversed from last year, going back to the initial, we did it the first year. It'll start at Henny Field and go just to the intersection, so we won't be utilizing Mill Pond Park at all.
Questions for the applicant? And I would also note you have a number of your colleagues on the Fair Board with you this evening, and we welcome you to Saline City Hall tonight. Thank you for being here. Are there questions? Ms. Dillon?
So,
Mr. Gearba?
I'm sorry. So it's just going from Henny Field to the intersection of North Ann Arbor?
No.
To Mills?
Bennett
Okay.
and Mills.
Mills, okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Anything else, Ms. Dillon?
No, thank you.
Mr. Gearba?
Could the clerk, our city manager, give us a little history on what we've done in terms of the showmobile fee? I can't remember what we did last year, honestly.
Last year, we waived it. There's a delivery fee of $500 that they've already paid, and we usually do not return that. We usually keep that for the delivery and return of the showmobile, but we did waive the fees for the
Rental, right?
the rental, yes.
Okay. That's it. Thank you.
Additional questions for either staff or for the applicant? Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Any subsequent discussion on the motion to acknowledge receipt? Then there's a motion on the floor moved by Gearboss, seconded by Dillon, to acknowledge receipt of the letter dated July the 6th. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. How about a motion now to approve or not to approve, and to waive or not to waive?
I'll move to approve and to waive the show rental fee of $1,600.
Very good. It's been properly moved by Councilmember Gearbach to approve the request and to waive the rental fee. Seconded by Councilmember Seal. Any discussion? That's easy enough. Then we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. Thank you all. Appreciate your work very much. Look forward to the fair parade on the 29th. We move on now to new business item 17-128. This is executive search service for the Saline Police Chief vacancy. And actually, if you'll indulge me, I'm going to move this motion but add some language to the end just so that there's no ambiguity. So I'm going to make a motion to acknowledge receipt of the memo dated July 31st, 2017 from City Manager Campbell to approve the contract with the Mercer Group in an amount of $24,500. And then, this would be the subsequent verbiage, to approve the mayor's appointment to the police chief search task force as outlined in the memo. Just want to make sure there's no ambiguity about that.
Could you please read that last part again?
I would be happy to. So after $24,500, it would read, and to approve the mayor's appointments to the police chief search task force as outlined in the memo.
I see,
Okay. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Seal. Mr. Campbell, do you want to go over your memo of July 31st? And then I would also note for council members, he did provide some supplemental information in hard copy form that was placed at each one of your seats prior to tonight's meeting. Mr. Campbell, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is, as we discussed at the last council meeting, this was the process being proposed is mirrors the last 5 years ago, 5.5 years ago, that we went through this process, which ended up hiring Chief Rinnick. So staff, we went out and we asked for 3 proposals of 3 search firms, one being the Michigan Municipal League, which is of course local, and they do a solid job of executive recruitment, the Mercer Group, and then SGR, Strategic Government Resources, I believe. They're all, those are of course national, out-of-state firms. They all do good, solid jobs. The Mercer Group, which I have proposed for council to consider awarding. You know, it's as far as the cost is in the middle of the road. MML, their enhanced search services was $19,000. The Mercer Group was $16,500 for fee of service and not to exceed $8,000 out-of-pocket expenses for $24,500. SGR $18,500 fee for services and then not to exceed $8,500 out-of-pocket expenses, so a total of $27,000. So, while there's certainly it's not inexpensive, but as you've heard me say before, and when you, I mean, any city hire is certainly very, very important, but hiring the right police chief is just as important as hiring the right city manager, and certainly one that's qualified, but also one that fits the department, fits the community. And so I think we're proposing, again, the Mercer Group. We think they do a very high-quality job, and they also do a lot of police chiefs. MML, not so much. They do more your city manager type searches. So, but they do from time to time do police, but not very much. So, the Mercer Group, SGR does a lot of police searches as well. But we think this would be a good recommendation. Also, just as a reminder, we would continue in that along the process of we would be scheduling here in the very near future a public meeting to invite the public to come in to city council chambers here at a meeting to help council understand what they want to see, what are important characteristics for the next police chief going forward. So I think that's certainly a very, very important part of this process, is to get the public's input. And then we would also gather input from council members as well as the executive department head team too. So be looking, any questions, be happy to do my best to answer them.
Let's start with questions relating to engaging an outside consulting firm. Are there questions for the city manager? Did you want to reference, by the way, this
Oh, sure, thank you. So the additional was just as we continue to look for some more, as Al Getchman, my administrative assistant, as she went through and received a couple more references, so that's essentially what this is additional references.
Questions for the city manager? Ms. Dillon and then Mr. Gearbox.
Thank you. The references, were they provided by Mercer?
They provided the names.
Okay. Because there's one that really doesn't have very good things to say about
Sure,
it.
sure.
On a lot of levels. And so I just wasn't sure about that. I mean, it definitely shows that they didn't stack the deck, because, I mean, they would have weeded out a couple of these comments, I think, themselves. But my other comment was that none of these people were in Michigan, and so your handout this evening does help a bit
Right.
to that. And we had another conversation earlier that answered some of my other questions, so I think I am good right now. Thank you.
You good? Okay. Mr. Gearbox?
My questions were just about the out-of-pocket expenses. Are Mercer's recruiters local, or are they out of state?
No, they're out of state, and that factors in 3 or 5 meetings, public meetings, and so there would be, obviously there would be one they would help facilitate the public meeting, asking the public what they want to see in their next chief of police. They would also conduct, at the end, the final interviews, as well as the semifinalist interviews, as far as in person. Some of the other vetting potentially would be via conference call or Skype, to vet with the task force to vet those applicants.
Okay. So other out-of-pocket expenses besides travel and whatever, copying and all those type of things are part of this out-of-expense?
Correct.
Okay. That was just one of my questions. Thank you.
Additional questions?
If I could, I'm sorry. One thing, again, it'll depend obviously on, last time we received north of 40 applicants, and they were all over the country. But if, one of the expenses not involved in here would be if we have a semifinalist or finalist we want to bring in and pay for their expenses.
No, I figured that. I just wanted to make sure what costs are we
Yep.
including in Mercer
Absolutely.
only, and when you have somebody from the out-of-state, those
Absolutely.
costs can come up really quick.
Yep, absolutely.
Additional questions? Let me just make a comment on the memo that I attached to the city manager's letter dated July the 31st. I'm very pleased with the way the interview task force came together. I think it's a nice mix of council, of course, staff, the city manager, and then some law enforcement professionals. In fact, I would note that 3 out of the 6 task force members have extensive law enforcement experience, in fact, at a pretty high level. I would also note, with the exception of Ed Toth, every single one of the task force members is a resident of the city of Saline, and Ed Toth is actually a graduate of Saline High School, and his parents still live in the Saline community, so he's obviously very invested in the success of the community, in particular its police department. So I look forward to working with those individuals. As my memo states, we'll be thorough and thoughtful, but also move expeditiously to narrow the field and to bring no more than 3 candidates to the full council for discussion and consideration. Ms. Dillon.
I'm sorry, one last question. Looking back at this, at Mercer, their populations for their cities are just way beyond Saline for the most part. Do we have any concerns about that? I mean, are they used to dealing with smaller communities, or are they big city police department people?
No, they're all over the board, if you will. So I think that regardless of the size, they'll conduct the search according to the needs of the community.
Okay. And you don't think that MML being Michigan-based holds more weight in the overall picture?
No, because I think the overall weight is to the experience of doing searches for police chiefs. I think that to me is what has more weight on it.
If I may add, I actually did a little bit of calling as well in regards to background on the three entities that were under consideration. And the most emphatic response that I got, Ms. Dillon, was, and I say this with great respect because I'm a proud member, I've participated actively, I think they do a great job advocating and educating city council members, but I received some very negative feedback about executive searches that have been conducted by MML, by some people whose judgment and experience I really trust. That was, in fact, of all the calls that I make, that was the strongest, that was what resonated the most with me. Additional questions? Then there's a motion on the, well, actually, excuse me, before I call the motion, is there any discussion? Well, let me say, oh, I'm sorry, before I entertain your comment, Mr. Har, I would ask this of my council colleagues to jump back to something I talked about 2 weeks ago and something that the city manager just touched on now, which is coordinating and scheduling a community open house to talk about the direction of our police department and what skills and attributes our constituents are looking for in their next police chief. I would ask that you work with the clerk's office to schedule that in the very near future, or propose a few dates, and then to email them out to city council to develop consensus on what's the best date. Once that consensus is developed, I want to send out a press release because I want to give our constituents, the residents of the community and business owners, about 2 weeks advance notice, but we need to get the ball rolling on that, okay? So please be on the lookout for an email from the city manager regarding the scheduling of that public open house. I'm sorry, Mr. Hart, the floor is yours.
That was actually the topic of my comment, which was, I hope that will happen soon, and I hope we will use every means at our disposal to get the word out, to get participation from members of the community, because this is a really important discussion.
Indeed. Okay. Any subsequent discussion? No, then there's a motion on the floor, moved by Marl, seconded by CO, to acknowledge, to approve, and to approve. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business item 17-129. This is resolution approving the closing documents for Lot 19A Sauk Trail Industrial Park Zippy's Car Wash. This will be a motion to approve or not to approve the resolution approving the closing of documents for Lot 19A Sauk Trail Industrial Park to Zippy's Estate LLC, and to authorize or not authorize the mayor and clerk to sign, and to authorize or not authorize the city manager to sign necessary closing documents.
Move to approve, authorize, and authorize.
Thank you, Mr. Gearbaugh. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilwoman Dillon. Mr. Campbell, do you want to begin this evening?
Actually, I'm going to defer to Mr. Smith because I can tell you a big thank you to Mr. Smith's office for putting these things together in a timely fashion to get them into your hands, and certainly working with the Weavers for Zippy's and their legal counsel. So I don't want to steal any of Scott's thunder.
We'll start with Mr. Smith, and then, of course, if the Weavers would like to make a comment, we would welcome that as well.
I think this is pretty self-explanatory. The purchase agreement called for certain items, including the easement, and we also wanted to clarify the signage and landscaping requirements, and clarify that there are some continuing obligations with respect to developing only a car wash on that site, but those obligations terminate once the car wash is open. So I think it clarifies all the remaining items, authorizes what we need to have authorized so we can show the resolution to the title company, and hopefully close by the end of the week.
Very good. Weavers, we welcome you here. Do you care to make any comment at this time?
I think we're good. We look forward to closing.
Excellent. We are too. Are there questions for staff, legal counsel, or for the petitioner? Ms. Dillon?
It's always me. Number 4, those documents are not attached to this document. Should they be?
They're actually fairly large documents, and we're not attaching them. We refer to them. They were approved by the Planning Commission and were part of what you approved from the Planning Commission when you
That's fine.
when you saw that.
They just weren't attached to this
Okay.
document. Thank you.
No, that's why they're so carefully referenced with details on dates and sheet numbers, so we know exactly what we've got.
Thank you.
Additional questions? Subsequent discussion on the motion? We're very excited to finally be closing on this. Thank you for your patience. and your cooperation, and we look forward to adding you to our already stellar roster of outstanding businesses in the city of Saline. So thank you very much. It's been properly moved by Gearboss, seconded by Councilwoman Dillon to approve, to authorize, and to authorize. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business item 17-130. This is Everstream Metro Permit Telecommunications. This will be a motion to approve or not to approve the resolution approving Everstream Metro Permit and to authorize or not authorize the mayor and city clerk to sign the resolution.
Move to approve and authorize.
It's been moved by Mayor Pro Tem to approve and to authorize. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilwoman Mitchell.
Mitchell.
Mr. Campbell, do you want to comment on this?
Essentially, it's a change of name of the company. So Great Lakes ComNet had installed some lines back in 2012, and so now this, with the name change to Everstream, have requested a 5-year permit to be issued. And so as you can see from the memo, because of the Metro Act, there's, I mean, as long as they're following the rules, which there are, which they are, the law does not allow really any objection to it. So, so either myself or Mr. Smith would be happy to do our best to answer any questions.
Questions for city staff or legal counsel? We'll start with Ms. Mitchell.
Thank you so much. So this comes up as part of something I witnessed in a neighborhood this week, and I called our police department because there were telephone wires and telephone equipment hanging down into the street from Crestwood. And my understanding is there is no specification in those contracts that they have to upkeep or remove the lines once they're finished. So I understand that we aren't disagreeing with this. We're under, this is a name change, but is there anything in the agreement about after these become obsolete, is there an obligation on the part of the company to clean up or remove? Sorry, Mr. Smith.
Nick Curcio really worked on this, so I haven't looked at the permit. There are a couple of things in that regard. One, we don't control the utility poles. Those are controlled by DTE or some other entity. It's usually part of the pole lease agreement that they have to be removed because the owners of the poles don't want those to stay on. So normally, we would probably talk to the owner of the pole about seeing that they're removed once they're no longer used.
Okay, just
Okay.
as a foresight for the future. Appreciate that.
Was that it, Ms. Mitchell?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Additional questions from the dais? Subsequent discussion? No, then it's been properly moved by Mayor Pro Tem Tahar, seconded by Councilwoman Mitchell to approve and to authorize. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business item 17-131. This is resolution to approve the development agreement and sidewalk installation agreement for Huntington Woods. This will be a motion to approve or not to approve the resolution to approve the development agreement and sidewalk installation agreement for Huntington Woods and to authorize or not authorize the clerk to sign the resolution. Is there a motion?
I'll move to acknowledge receipt of it. It's a separate motion. Because it's not really written that way to do it, as we normally have.
Let me see here real quick. Hold on just one second, Mr. Gearbaum.
Yep.
Because there's no attachment. Let's, we'll put Robert's rules aside for just a moment unless there's objection, and just allow for a discussion and comment from staff before we entertain a motion, if that's all right. Who would like to begin? Mr. Rubel, do you want to start on this, or does Mr. Smith? Why don't you begin, Mr. Rubel, then we'll let Mr. Smith comment, we'll entertain any questions that council members have.
We started maybe a month and a half, 2 months ago, and I was in correspondence with Mr. Nick Curcio of Dickinson Wright, and based on our standard documents, plus nuances and items taken from the actions of the Planning Commission and the particular needs of this site, considering that there was a Phase 1 constructed with Huntington Woods, so we had something to build on, sort of a platform. And so what we did, working with the developer and Pulte Homes, was to draft the appropriate document that would address the needs of the homeowner association, City of Saline, and the builder. And so Nick, knowing that, worked with us to develop the various articles within both the sidewalk agreement and with the development agreement. And it draws into the site plan requirements, and it draws in the city standards, and the ultimate goal of taking dedication of the water, sanitary, streets for as public utilities, as we normally do with subdivision projects.
Mr. Smith, is there anything you'd like to add?
No, the only thing unique is the sidewalk agreement, which kind of stands outside of this one, and that's because the current developer has the obligation to construct the sidewalk and intends to assign Phase 2 of the development to Pulte Homes to complete.
We do have the property owner and a representative from Pulte Homes here, Joe Score, as well as Dave Shipman. Gentlemen, we appreciate you being here this evening. Do you care to make any comment for the public record at this time?
No, thank you.
Okay. Questions for staff, legal counsel, or the applicant? Mr. Gearbolt.
I think the one concern that's come up, and even the individuals in Phase 1, is the entire idea of that sidewalk going across Monroe Street Bridge and having to coordinate this with the county road commission.
Right.
And so I think concerns have been is how do we actually make this happen? And the other part of it is also if this doesn't happen within the next year or two, my question would be is, do we have this bonded so that at any point in the future, we have the money set aside to pay for this?
Yes, well, basically, yes to all your questions. We've been working strenuously with the engineers, Mr. Shipman, and with the County Road Commission. And now we've gotten to a point where they basically have accepted the plan with the final notes that went in on the plan today from Washtenaw Engineering to the County Road Commission. So they are, at this point, fine with the plan. They've met the criteria. We had them add both the city standards as well as the county standards to the construction drawing, which is one sheet that was actually in the site plan that was approved. So we are almost there on it. They're basically committed to issuing a permit. What they need, of course, is once the contractor information is in, they need the contractor's name and commitment to it. I believe in the agreement you'll see there's a $65,000 deposit requirement. Mr. Shipman will provide that check as a deposit. He is the one that will engage the contractor. He's already requested a bid. He notified me today. We had several questions for him just the other day on this. And so he did respond positively to all those questions about all the preparation items needed to get that underway. And I think the goal is to get that constructed yet this year. In fact, the good thing here, Mr. Score, right? And is very excited about starting right now.
Correct.
And so we've done a lot of advanced work on that. Today we assigned addresses for all the building lots.
Great.
So we worked ahead on all of this. We worked ahead and helped them obtain all the DEQ permits. They have all the DEQ permits, the Washtenaw County Soil Erosion Permit. So we did a lot of hand-holding here and a lot of coordination and advanced work to get it to this point where once council approves it, this will basically take off.
Let me also add, Mr. Gearbolt, because I've had multiple conversations with my counterpart, Doug Fuller, the chair of the Washtenaw County Road Commission, about this particular project and initiative. I know Mr. Campbell has had conversations with his counterpart, Roy Townsend, the executive director of the Road Commission. We're determined to advocate and do what we can do from our side to make this happen. I think you and I agree this is important. It's important to the residents of Huntington Woods. So we've, as Mr. Rubel indicated, the ball is in motion, and I feel very optimistic.
Yeah, because I know the Planning Commission's concern was we didn't want to hold this project up because of just that situation, but we want to make sure it happens and that it does occur. And when you get involved with the Road Commission, it's a whole nother world. And actually, since we may be looking at replacing the Monroe Street Bridge, how we coordinate with that and everything could potentially be down the road. So my concern is just making sure we've got everything in place that when it does happen, we've got everything to pay the cost of it and not necessarily burdening the city on that. So,
Correct.
Thank you.
Additional questions for staff or legal counsel or the applicant? No, then I'll make a motion to approve the resolution, to approve the development agreement and sidewalk installation agreement with Huntington Woods, and to authorize the clerk to sign the resolution.
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Gearbox. Again, because we appreciate you both being here this evening, Mr. Shipman, Mr. Stakor, do you care to make any comment at this time?
I'll make a comment.
Please. You sat here for an hour, you might as well say something.
I'm Joe Score. I'm the VP of Land for Pulte Homes, Michigan. I'll just say that we're very excited about this development. We have no doubt that it will be a high-quality, very successful project in the city of Saline.
Very good.
Thank you.
Well, needless to say, Pulte Homes has an outstanding reputation. Dave Shipman has an outstanding reputation, has done some great projects in the city of Saline. We look forward to this coming to fruition. Our chamber director mentioned during the first citizen comment period that there are a number of outstanding things that hopefully could be resolved this evening, and I hope he was referring to this one, because as Mr. Shipman and I have discussed, Phase 2 of Huntington Woods was first discussed with City Staff and Planning Commission in 2003. So this has taken a long time to come to fruition, but it's a very positive development. We look forward to working with you and hope you can break ground very soon. Any discussion on the motion on the floor? Been properly moved by Marl, seconded by Gearbox to approve and to authorize. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. Thank you, gentlemen. We move on now to new business item 17-132, council professional development. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the memo dated August 2nd, 2017 from Clerk Royal, and to authorize or not authorize Councilmember Mitchell to attend the Saline Leadership Institute and the Michigan Municipal League 2017 convention at an estimated cost of $996 plus hotel expense.
Your Honor.
Yes.
I would like to abstain from this vote.
Okay.
Move to acknowledge and authorize.
Very good. Moved or acknowledged and approved or authorized by Gearbox, seconded by McClellan, and noting for the public record that Councilwoman Mitchell will be abstaining from both discussion and vote on this matter. Thank you very much. Do you care to make any comment on this? No? Okay. Well, needless to say, Saline Leadership Institute, as we already established this evening, outstanding organization which will equip you, Ms. Mitchell, with a number of skills and attributes which I think will help you do a better job as a council member, Michigan Municipal League, plethora of resources that you'll find invaluable. So thank you for pursuing additional education and insights. Any additional discussion on this item? Ms. Dillon.
I just have a question, and it's for Mr. Campbell probably. Since we have an allotment of $1,000 per council, and she's going to go over that, how does that get handled? I mean, you're killing our budget, Christie.
Yeah. Essentially, potentially, budget. It would be a budget amendment for that line item. And as you all aware, we do 3 times a year. We do 2 to 3 times a year. We do budget amendments. So as long as the bottom line is the same, but there have been in the past. We've kind of go in I don't want to say fits and starts, but there's some councils utilize their training dollars more than others, I guess. And so this is a council which I certainly encourage, because I think these are some, as the mayor, I echo what the mayor just said about both organizations, both trainings. So very positive and very helpful. So certainly money well spent from my perspective.
Thank you. Okay. And I just have a comment. Having done SLI, I fully support it, and having gone to the convention, and will be going to Holland also, hopefully. I'm looking forward to seeing you there.
Good. Mr. Hart.
This is a more general procedural question. We don't always approve council professional development expenditures, so why are we approving this one?
So we have done it, like you said, in the past, off and on, and because it's over her budget line item, I thought it'd be best to do that.
Okay, yeah, thank you. What I suspected, but just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Additional discussion? No, then we'll proceed to vote. It's been properly moved by Gearbox, seconded by McClellan, to acknowledge receipt and to authorize. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay, and abstentions 1. Thank you. Motion passes. We move on to new business item 17-131. This is cleaning contract, First Impressions Janitorial. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the memo dated August the 2nd, 2017 from City Manager Campbell, and to approve or not to approve the 6-month cleaning contract with First Impressions Janitorial, and to authorize or not authorize the mayor and city clerk to sign the contract. Is there a motion?
Move to acknowledge, to approve, and to authorize.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Tarr. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Seal. Mr. Campbell, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you've seen the memo, are, well, no longer current because they closed their doors as of August 1st. But our previous janitorial services provider unfortunately closed their doors after about a year and a half or so of service. You may recall they actually came in, we had a long time cleaning service that had done a great job. Then all of a sudden, the last, say, 4 to 6 months of that contract, well, actually we ended it early, but they started, just rapidly declining in their service, and so we brought on Covenant Cleaning, and they covered that gap for us. We went out to bid, RFP, and they were the winning bidder as well, and they were doing a very good job, very solid job at all 3 of our facilities that they provide services to, but they've had to close their doors at a very short notice, and so this actually, some of the employees have now, with the vast array of accounts that Covenant Cleaning had, are essentially kind of going into business themselves. And so what's proposed here is that, and what's been going on since August 1st, is the same crew that was cleaning under the old providers would be continuing to provide the services for all 3 facilities that are going forward. And so that's what we propose to do. Also, the thought is that this gives us an opportunity, as you kind of, if you will, to kick the tires and see how they provide the service, if they continue to do a good job, and then potentially with the opportunity to extend an agreement, of course, that would come back to council after 6 months if we thought that, these guys are doing a really great job, and so we believe that we should just extend out as long as we can come to terms, and then we would present it to council for your all consideration. Or if not, either we couldn't come to terms, or if we think that we ought to just ought to go for an RFP, then we would take that direction. And also they would the current 6-month contract would be for the same exact terms and cost as the agreement that was under Covenant Cleaning.
Questions for the city manager? Ms. Dillon?
As always. Is there an issue with it being a DBA and not being an LLC yet?
Well, that's what, when working with Mr. Smith, we would, that's what she has applied for, and just waiting for her notice from the state, her confirmation. So we could, I think, Mr. Smith, you had it that we would, if we added some language to it.
We'll simply change the name in the agreement and re-sign it when we confirm that the paperwork's been filed and accepted by the state. She's already gotten a federal employer identification number for the LLC, so we've simply got to make sure the name on the FEIN matches up with the filing with the state, and we'll be all set.
Okay. And I take it that this company is insured, bonded, and it's...
They're meeting all of the
They're
requirements.
meeting all our requirements that way.
Correct.
And same with employee background checks?
Absolutely.
And all of that? Okay.
Absolutely.
And is there a reason why we're going with a 6-month contract versus like 60 days or something like that? It seems like 6 months is an awful long time to tire kick.
The difficulty is that if we let it go 60 days or 120 days, and then you decide to bid it out, there's a bidding period too, because you've got to let the bids for 30 days, then you've got to get somebody online. So 6 months is a fairly skinny period if you decide you want to go out for bids.
Okay, and what is the normal best practice on that? I mean, is it in the city's best interest at that 6-month period to do RFPs?
City can decide what seems to, if they're working, extend it. If they're not working, go out for bids.
Okay.
It's also not easy, and it's fairly disruptive to keep changing companies because you have to vet and get personnel up to speed and so forth on all of the city facilities. So it's also intensive on our end of things to change those services.
Okay, thank you very much.
Additional questions? Mr. Gearbox?
Just clarify for me when our previous one ended and this one took over? Or this one will take over? Who's cleaning right now, I guess?
Well, actually, First Impressions is currently cleaning because they closed the doors as of August 1st.
What we did is decide it was within Mr. Campbell's spending discretion to fill it in for that gap, knowing that we would have the meeting early this month to approve this contract.
So is this retroactive or moving forward?
It's moving forward, and they're going to be paid on the same basis as the old cleaning company was and that this contract provides.
Okay, thank you.
Additional questions? Subsequent discussion? Then we have a motion on the floor, moved by Tahar, seconded by CO, to acknowledge receipt, to approve, and to authorize. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business item 17-134. This is Maple Oaks Agreement. This is a motion to approve or not to approve the resolution approving the documents relating to Maple Oaks project and authorizing the signing of the closing documents.
Move to approve.
Thank you, Councilwoman McClellan. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. CO. Mr. Campbell, if you'd like to make a comment, and then I believe we have the applicant here as well, Mr. Godfrey in the back. And we appreciate you being here this evening.
Certainly, Mr. Mayor, thank you. So this is, of course, a long time coming, and nobody knows that better than Mr. Godfrey for sure. But it's been a great, we've worked very well across the board with the developer, with our city staff, city attorney's office, and so when and I say this a little bit tongue-in-cheek, of course, but when Mr. Gearbock asked me whether or not we have the agreement signed with American Tower, I can say yes. So finally, after a lot of hand-holding and maybe a little bit of hand-wringing, it finally got done. So I sort of appreciate everybody's patience, Mr. Godfrey included, to get it done, and thank you to American Tower as well. But again, as you all know, it's a great project. I think everybody's very excited about it, and it's just been a great effort. So I guess I'll turn over to, I don't know if Mr. Smith has any comments, or Mr. Godfrey.
Mr. Smith, any comments?
No.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Godfrey, any comments this evening? No. Appreciate you being here, appreciate your patience, but more importantly, thank you for proposing and moving ahead with this project. It is really important, and ultimately will be beneficial to the community. Questions for city staff, legal counsel, or the petitioner? Any discussion? That was easy enough. Then we'll call for the vote. It's been properly moved by McClellan, seconded by CO to approve. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Bill. Appreciate it. We move on to the discussion portion of our agenda this evening. First up is commission, committee, and task force reports from council members.
Oh, I have one.
You got one?
I do.
It's all you.
Okay, the Saline Community Addiction Prevention Task Force, also known as the Drug Task Force, is accepting nominations to its board of directors. There is a form which will be online, or paper copies will be available at the dispatcher desk at the police station. They will be due next Tuesday, which is the 14th. If you have questions on the form, there's contact information.
Very good. Thank you. Additional commission, committee, or task force reports? Reports or other announcements? Mr. Gearbock.
Other announcements, this weekend, the Historical Society will have its Rentschler Farm yard sale on the 11th and 12th. That's Friday and Saturday from, I'm trying to get our times here, I believe it's 9 o'clock. So we're looking forward. It's a great fundraiser for the activities, and there's a lot of individuals that come in, and it usually has about 2,000 people visiting. So it's a great opportunity to not only help with the economy, but also to help with the society's fundraising. And then also this weekend, Summerfest.
Actually, you can make it an entire Saline Saturday. You could go to the farmers market downtown. You can come to my coffee hour. I gave you a little flyer. The clerk passed out flyers this evening. My coffee hour is this Saturday, beginning at 10 a.m. at Kerrigan Cafe. Look forward to a robust discussion about timely issues, but also the future of our community. You can hang around for the summer festivities and events, which will also take place on Friday night, and then mosey on down to Rentschler Farm and enjoy the garage sale hosted by the Historic Society. So, a lot to do this weekend for sure. Any other reports or announcements? Todd, are you taking the lead on the wastewater treatment plant this evening?
I am.
Noting the absence of Mr. Scull.
Yes, sir. So, a couple things to report. You may recall the short-term efforts that we're taking to help with the odor. We started feeding the peroxide, the raw water flow at the headworks to help with odor abatement. So we're still working on getting the right dosage and that type of thing of the peroxide. The do-all scrubber is back online with all the new media. You may recall that. Let's see. So we have, let's see, we've not had any, this was complaints July 15th through August 3rd. I'll say 2nd because 3rd I know there were some complaints that Thursday evening that I actually went out and met with one of our wastewater guys. We were checking things out, that type of thing. But
I think 3 of the complaints came from the dais.
They did. They did. In fact, actually, well, 3 and then 1 update. So.
Okay.
And then also we had, I believe I included this in my communique. We actually had both of the Nova filters went down, not at the same time, and not for the same reasons. One is back up, so we have at least one, which is more than we need, if you will. But the other, they're working on bringing the other one back. So these are a couple different items, different failures, I believe. So continue to work with them, as frustrating as it is. So that is the update.
I'd also note that, of course, as everyone is aware, and this will be a public meeting, and we would be delighted to have the public attend and comment if they wish, but we'll be having a discussion on August the 28th here at 7 p.m. to discuss the final wastewater treatment odor analysis with staff and with the associates from Webster Environmental. If for whatever reason we're able to do that sooner, we will do it, but I think it's likely that it will take place on the 28th. I did want to note too, because this came up from a couple council members, we're going to handle that meeting very similar to the way we handle regular council meetings, in the sense that the material that will be provided as support and background will likely be delivered to your door or sent out electronically that Thursday evening, the Thursday before. So you'll have the weekend, well, more than the weekend, to digest and review it, and hopefully come prepared for that meeting on the 28th.
If I may.
Please.
Also, in addition to that, we will have our bond counsel and financial advisor here to talk about alternative funding strategies.
Excellent. Yes, ma'am, I'm sorry.
I wanted to piggyback on the wastewater. There's been some other smells besides our usual smells. There's been sort of a animal feces type smell, and there's been a very sour vomit smell. They don't seem to be coming from the wastewater treatment plant. Do we have any idea where those smells? Are they sewage gases? Are they spraying fields? Do we have any idea where those smells are coming from?
Well, again, the speculation. I mean, that there are farms south of town. They could certainly, if they're cleaning out their manure pits and that type of thing, could potentially be adding to that odor. But again, that's from my perspective, that's pure speculation. But yeah, we've heard that as well. That hey, it's not your
It's
typical.
not the typical
It's not your
smell.
typical wastewater treatment plant odor.
Ms. Mitchell.
I have a question for Mr. Campbell. I just didn't hear it. How many complaints had we had during that period total, please?
Sorry, let me get back.
Yeah.
We had not had any complaints, at least at the plant, registered from July 15th to August 3rd, and up until August, and that evening is when I received 3 from council members and a 4th update.
Okay, so none from 15th to August 3rd. Okay.
And I would also note for the record that when I generally, almost exclusively, when I contact Mr. Campbell to report an odor issue, it is because a constituent, a resident, or more have contacted me.
I see.
And that was the situation on Thursday. Mr. Gearbo?
I had a C-Clicks Fix update today about somebody complaining about orders, so I'm not sure what that was.
Okay.
We'll follow up.
We'll follow up. Thank you.
From Marcana Court.
Okay.
Anything else on this issue? No, then we'll transition now to the 425 agreement, Andalina Farms with Saline Township. We do have the petitioner, the applicant here, as well as his legal counsel from Dykema. Gentlemen, we appreciate you being with us this evening. Do you care to make any additional comment? We would welcome that.
We'd like to give you a handout.
Please,
Yeah.
please come forward. Do you want to give the handouts to Councilwoman McClellan at the end there? We'll make sure everyone on the dais receives one. Yep, we'll pass them down, Bill. You want to make a comment about what we're looking at? The attorney does? Yeah.
Thank you, Alan Green again. I appreciate being here. I guess I would have liked to have gotten you that information beforehand, or we would have, but based upon the last informational meeting you had, it was clear that you didn't have a sense of the history of the project, what we're doing, some of the issues that have been addressed. So we wanted to give you some information about who we are as developers and builders, what the process has been, and there's a timeline in there, and I know you're not going to be able to digest it all as you're talking here. But we've literally been at this for about 4.5 years. We submitted a PUD application back in 2013 to the township. We went to our first public hearing about 3 years ago, and at that time the township asked us to consider going to the city of Saline as part of an Act 425 agreement. And that was because the township and the city had master plans that were complementary to each other from years past, where this property, along with other property, was hoped to be developed within the city to allow the city to expand its boundaries as it grew. And so the communities had reached this agreement. Both master plans covered the property, and based upon a joint meeting of the township's planning commission and township board asking us to do that, we tabled our request. And then we reached out to the city, worked with the city administration, actually for, I think, almost 19 months to really study the city's wastewater treatment and water system. It was unclear whether there was capacity to serve us, whether the system was adequate, whether the pipes were available or not. And so we funded the studies undertaken by your engineers. I mean, so we didn't do anything other than to fund it, but you folks hired your engineers. And those studies came out, and the end result of that was it was really, for a variety of reasons, economically unfeasible for both the city and the developer to utilize the city's utilities at this time. I mean, it wasn't even a close call. Based upon that, Mr. Campbell sent a letter, I think it was actually to me, a little over a year ago, indicating the understanding that it's been nice to talk to you, but it's not economically feasible under current circumstances to do this. We then took our application off the table with the township, and we went back, it was about a year ago, again, where we went to the Township Planning Commission. The Planning Commission ended up recommending approval of the PUD agreement for Andalina Farms. We've had no opposition, just so you know, at any public hearing or meeting of the township residents with respect to the project itself. Township agreed that the project met their master plan. They liked the project, everything we were doing. They were concerned about, again, two things. We really thought the property ought to be developed in the city. That was our intent. And you should get your utilities from the city if you can. Again, when we went to the township, we already had a deal in place with River Ridge to get utilities through River Ridge. So, contrary, there was a comment made in the public comment section that we haven't talked to River Ridge or anything like that. We actually have a contract in place. It's expired, and we're working on an amendment to that, because if we do the city deal, then that's going to be different. So we went back, 2 more comments on the history. We went back, we got approval. The Planning Commission in Saline Township gave us approval conditional on us doing 3 things: giving to the board evidence that we had an arrangement with River Ridge to actually service the project, giving them information on the capacity of the River Ridge utility systems. And third, they wanted us to provide them evidence or information as to the non-liability of Saline Township for those systems. Saline Township says we're not going to take any responsibility for these systems if we're to approve this. We provided all that information to the Township Board. Then we went to the Township Board, I believe it was in October of last year, and the Township Board approved the PUD. This is the preliminary PUD plan, conditional on a 60-day time period within which to continue to evaluate the utilities. And there was one last request, can't we all go back and talk about this again to see if we can work out an arrangement with the city of Saline? So we held a meeting. It was in December, sort of a meeting with city officials as well as township officials, council. We hashed out this whole idea, and that's where we came up with the idea that we as attorneys, and I think you heard from Mr. Smith, indicated you can do a 425 agreement without providing for sewer and water. I mean, it's not obligated to do that. 425 agreement's a very flexible device. It was clear that at least theoretically the city wanted the property, wanted the tax base, wanted the ability to expand in the future. If we developed this property in the township, it would serve as a block to the other properties that were also planned someday in the future to allow the city to expand. So that seemed like the city wanted it, the township definitely wanted it. After that suggestion was made, we all went back. I believe the Township Board actually had a meeting, and they didn't approve the agreement, but they approved the concept of going forward with an Act 425 agreement, with us continuing to be served by the River Ridge utilities. And that's when we started preparing, I think as you heard at the last meeting, the drafts of an actual 425 agreement, and that's where we are today. So I wanted to give you that history of where we came from, that it hasn't been something that just came up suddenly. And we're here, we'll answer any questions. We want to cooperate with you guys, we want to be good citizens. We're excited about this project. We think this will be a great project too, whichever community it's built in. So I guess that's all I have to say right now.
Very good.
Thank
Would
you.
either of your associates care to make a comment at this time, or are you good, gentlemen? Good, okay. We
Thank you.
appreciate the supplemental material, and obviously we'll take an opportunity in the next few days and weeks to review this.
Thank you.
But that's very helpful. Let me say a few things, and I had sort of it was an impromptu discussion with Councilwoman Mitchell about this issue and some of the broader issues this afternoon. First, I want to note that Chief Legal Counsel Smith did send out a memoranda pertaining to this issue that for some reason I overlooked, and so I have not had an opportunity to read it yet. That's another thing I need to review before I develop a really firm opinion on this matter. But what I would like to do, unless there are objections, is I would like to have this issue revisited again as a discussion item at our next City Council meeting. So that gives us 2 weeks to review some material that has recently been distributed and to ask questions or to raise concerns through the City Manager's office. When we regroup in 2 weeks, I will be looking for consensus not only on how we move forward on the proposal by Pinnacle Homes and Andalina Farms, but I think there are some other issues that Council should develop consensus on. Another issue, and Mr. Gearbaugh is aware of this because he's been very emphatic, we have a policy that dates back many years that is unambiguous, that says that the City of Saline will not extend utilities, water and sewer services to customers who exist outside of the corporate limits of the City of Saline. One thing we may want to consider is if we bring parcels into the City of Saline, do we want a similar requirement saying if you come into the City of Saline, you have to take our water and sewer services? I don't know that that's appropriate or prudent, but I think it's something that we ought to consider. The other thing that needs consideration, in my opinion, is the 425 agreements in a broad sense. because I think as in the coming years, we're going to be approached by other developers and other property owners to bring parcels into the city via a 425 agreement. And I think one of the things that would be very helpful for staff when they're negotiating or when they're approached with these requests is to understand what council's opinion and what their take is on 425, specific to the length of the 425 agreement and what is going to be, how are we going to share revenue. I cited at the last council work meeting, and this is my opinion, but on principle, I think the arrangement that we worked out with Saline Township in regards to Huntington Woods was not good public policy. I'm interested in setting a fixed amount in terms of a mill, half a mill, 1.5 mills for a finite period of time, and then it ends. I would also note that with 425 agreements, and Mr. Smith, you can correct me if I'm wrong, per statute, they can actually return to their original, the original municipality after an extended period of time.
They can.
Okay. And obviously, I think that's something that we would want to avoid and set in policy. I'm in favor of, if a parcel comes into the city, it's in the city in perpetuity, and there's no discussion, no argument about that. So again, similar to the issue that we discussed at the work meeting this evening, this is complex and multi-dimensional. And I will say, as it relates to the Andalina Farms Pinnacle Homes proposal, I am not unbiased. I do have some concerns, and I want to understand more about the potential ramifications that exist with you connecting to a private wastewater treatment plant and facility. But I'm also keenly aware, and I think your legal counsel mentioned this tonight, and there's an aerial shot of the parcel in consideration. And I would use this term deliberately and strategically. If you look at the property in question, it's really the nailhead that connects the city of Saline to other properties that have the potential to be developed and annexed into the city of Saline. And I've said for a long time, the city ought to grow, but we ought to be very smart and strategic and thoughtful about that. So again, I'm not prepared to articulate a judgment or a definite opinion this evening, but I did want to let you know how I'm thinking. So that was really convoluted. But there are many factors to consider, and again, I don't know that it's appropriate to go into length about them this evening. We do have some additional material to review. But again, I'm going to be looking for consensus in a few weeks, not only on how do we proceed with Andalina Farms, but I want to set in policy, or I want to set policy relating to 425 agreements in the future. Does anybody have any questions about that, Mr. Gearbaum?
I agree with all what you've mentioned and stated about. My other bigger concern that I'd like to look at too is we're strapped with our current capacity unless we start expanding or doing something. We're now at that point where we've got to start talking future, because we don't know what would happen in terms of annexation into the larger sections north or to the south. So we are at that point where we have to talk about our utilities and where we're going to go in the future. We're hoping that wasn't at that point now, but I think we're at it. Especially if we have more annexations coming in.
You're absolutely right. We have some existing capacities as it relates to infill and vacant parcels that are in the city or subject to automatic annexation. When we start talking about annexing or adding parcels that are in adjacent municipalities, we have some serious issues relating to infrastructure.
And when we start talking about density and so forth, we're at that point, and if we can't continue to figure out how we're going to grow, we're stuck.
Mr. Seal.
The question I have, you've talked about sanitary and water service. What about stormwater? Where does that go in this proposal?
Please.
Sure. Bill Anderson with that. Well, the site falls from the north down to Michigan Avenue on the south. There'll be stormwater detention and water quality devices, ponds to manage the stormwater, and it'll be ultimately discharged into the Michigan Avenue right away. Those will be reviewed and approved through the city office and through the drain office as well as MDOT.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Let me ask this question. Gentlemen, are all three of you or any combination of the three of you able to attend our next city council meeting? Yeah. Be able to be here? Okay. Well, unless there's objection from the dais, this would be added again as a discussion item. So it would be towards the end of the agenda, so coming around probably 8:30 would be appropriate. You don't need to be here right at 7:30 if your schedule does not permit. But we appreciate you being here in the event that there are additional questions or comments. Please, if you have an additional thought.
Thank you. Also, feel free if staff or anybody has any questions that you come up with as you're thinking about it the next couple of weeks and you need more information from us, let us know. I mean, we'll be happy to provide it to you.
Very good.
Okay, thanks.
Well, as was stated, it's, this is a lot to digest, and we do want to be thoughtful and strategic about it, take our time. We appreciate your patience, but we also appreciate your interest in developing a really attractive project in our community. It means a lot.
No, we appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. If there's nothing further on 425, let's move on to the electronic use policy. I believe, Ms. Mitchell, you had some questions or concerns that you would like to raise?
Thank you. Just going to switch my brain over.
Yeah.
So one of my thoughts is that this policy attempts to cover employees that are managed by Mr. Campbell, but it also attempts to cover elected officials. And I wonder if it would not be advisable to have two different policies, because there are things in here that do not cross over to me, that they just don't pertain to me.
I appreciate that. Mr. Smith, I don't mean to put you on the spot. In your legal professional opinion, any merit in splitting these and developing a policy for staff and council?
We can certainly do that, but I guess don't know, I would have to have examples of what you think doesn't apply. And
well, okay, so one of the things that gave me pause was the Electronic Communications Administration, page 5 of 8. And I understand having a social media policy that moves one way for a city staff member, but with respect to Mr. Campbell, I'm not going to speak to him personally, but we are elected officials. We do not fall under the umbrella of the city manager. The city manager reports to us. And so it feels overly broad, some of the communication policies. And I also, I look at the social media section 1, fourth line, matters pending, anticipated to come before or decided by that body. I don't know how that can always be anticipated. And I would hate to have a policy in place that somebody may unknowingly not abide by, but then have a consequence because of that.
well, this policy addresses communications on behalf of the city, and as a council member, you are not authorized to communicate on behalf of the city.
Correct. So for example,
Okay.
and I guess I need some education because I'm new. So for say this 425 agreement,
Right.
and somebody puts something on the Saline Post, the open discussion, and there's misinformation. So it's tough to have misinformation stand on social media, and I think there's too much weight given into social media opinions which are not necessarily fact-based. And I think if we have some fact-based evidence and can speak to that, I guess I'm...
Then you're speaking only as an individual and not as a representative of the city, because the city is represented under its current policy. The city manager tends to be the spokesperson for the city, or somebody else that the council would officially delegate that responsibility to. So you're free as an individual to weigh in anytime you want. But you're not really authorized as a city council member to say, that, on
For all
behalf
of
of the
council.
city, I'm saying X, Y, and Z.
I see.
So that's the distinction. You can say, I happen to be a council member, my personal opinion is, or my understanding of the city policy is, you're perfectly free to do that anytime you want.
So then to stay on the safe side of, it's my interest to adhere to the policies, is it better to use that phrase, speaking as an individual or an individual council member?
Or
Is it-
I'm a council member, my personal opinion is, or whatever, but you need to, that's a difficulty of being an elected official. You have to make sure that nobody misinterprets what you're saying as speaking on behalf of the body unless you've been authorized or directed to do that. That's just part of what comes with the territory of being an elected official. And there are some other cases where you shouldn't be commenting at all. If you've got, for instance, final approval of a PUD plan, you should not be commenting on that.
Can you repeat that?
If you've got a final approval of a PUD plan, you as a city council sit in a quasi-judicial capacity on that. You're looking at that in terms of does it meet the ordinance requirements and so forth, because it's a zoning decision that gets made and it's not a legislative issue per se. And if it meets the ordinance requirements, you're obligated under state law to approve it. And so you shouldn't be commenting ahead of time on a pending application before the council, which is another point in the some of what you were referring to as concerns in the policy. I'm happy to look at the policy. It's your policy. We can make two policies for the council and the staff. I'm just not, and there probably are some that I'm just not thinking of right now, but I'm not sure there are all that many examples of where it applies to the staff and doesn't apply to you, or there are differences in how we deal with things. Again, you can do whatever you want, and we'll make it however you want it to be, because it's your policy, not mine. But I'm just trying to understand.
Absolutely. Right. Yes, we're on the same page. So I guess my questions then would be, what do comparable municipalities do? Do they have separate agreements for elected officials versus employees? And then I certainly feel like I need some education on being compliant, which is, my sincere desire of any policy that this body puts forward. So I'm just stating my need for that.
I think that's great. I think the city manager can sit down with you to address the second issue you just raised. And we can certainly reach out to MML and some of our neighbors to see what they have in terms of enacted policy relating to the appropriate use of electronics. That's fine. And if there's no objection, this will be added again as a discussion item at our next meeting. Hopefully we can resolve any outstanding issues at that time, and it can come back no later than our first meeting in September for action. Please.
And then, sorry, I have another question. So this policy, does it apply only to our use of city electronics? Or does it apply to any electronics that we use for communication?
It applies to your use of city-owned electronic devices, or anybody's use of city-owned electronic devices, and it refers to electronic communications made on behalf of or in the course of city business. Okay?
So it's everything. It's my personal device, it's my
If
city.
you're using your personal device for city business, yes, it would apply to your use of your personal device when using it for city business.
So I guess I'm interested, just a few comments from my fellow city council members on their thoughts after this discussion.
Go ahead, Mr. Gierbaum.
That's the reason why I wanted to table it. It's partially because of that. But also, from my perspective, and I agree with you, we need to have something as a guideline. Where I really get concerned is if we become such to the point that we're gagging ourselves and not being able to express ourselves the way we were elected as officials. So at some point, we can over-legislate and we can overdo it. And that's where my concern when we look at this is where does that fall? And I agree, we can't represent ourselves as being council. We're never supposed to do that, as giving direction or whatever as one individual or such. But it's that balance in this policy that I think we do need some clarification, because like in any organization, employees and staff and everything need to know what they can and cannot do. When it comes to us, I think we have more the public interest, and we need to figure out exactly where that balance is. And again, I'm seeing these as guidelines and trying to figure out when that really is the most inappropriate time to be acting, when we shouldn't be acting, and when we can be safe and when we can do what we want. And I think that's going to be kind of up to the individual person that's making those comments at times. It has always been that way. We had tried to address that, and I don't know where exactly that's going to be done, because they currently do it in every branch of our state legislature. And
Well, and I would just add this, that I think Mr. Gearbuss spot on. I think this is overall is a good policy. If folks want to take a little bit more time and be thoughtful about it, that's great. As it relates to one of your concerns, I actually think, and I'm not, by my own admission, I'm not really on social media that much. It's not really my trip. I'm not into that. But from what I observe, I think council members do a pretty good job of, actually, I'm not aware of an example in recent history of a city council member trying to represent the city. I think council members do a good job of saying, this is my position as Dean Gearbaugh, individual city council member, or Brian Morrow, individual city council member. So I don't identify that as a particular, I'm not concerned about that, at least at the present. Ms. McClellan.
Yeah, I think the issue comes in when, you know, you're trying to clarify something for someone that, you know, it's that fine line of, yes, I am an individual, but I'm also a council member, so people are going to come to me because I'm a council member to say something that they wouldn't necessarily say to me just as an individual. Does that make sense? I think it's, for me, sometimes it's a gray area, like, should I be, you know, even having a discussion with somebody? But then you have the issue of, you know, I'm representing constituents, so I feel like I need to be able to have a conversation like I would, you know, face to face with someone. It's just that you're having it online. So where is the...
Well, if we're again looking at social media, the policy's designed to address the social media use that represents city policy. You are free as a council member to express your own views. You're free to express and say, geez, that doesn't seem right, or I'll have to check into that, or that's not my understanding. My understanding is, one council member's perspective is, I mean, there are a whole lot of ways that you can make it clear. You know, I think you're not representing the council, you're not saying this is the city policy and so forth, and you're free to do that all of the time. And as an elected official, you're free to express your individual opinion. That's what the public expects of you, is to understand what that opinion is and what your thinking is, and you're free to do that. This policy is to talk about communications that are on behalf of the city, or where you're using city devices, and that sort of thing. If it's not clear, and there are concerns about that, then we've got to go back and fix the policy so that it's clear, or help everyone understand what we're trying to say in the policy. So again, please understand, it's your policy, it's not mine. I can tell you what it's designed to do and what we think it does, but if it's not clear, then it's not functioning well.
So let's do this. This will be revisited as a discussion item at our next council meeting. I think the city manager will touch base with you on some of your concerns related to this issue, Ms. Mitchell, and we'll try and get some data relating to how other communities address the appropriate use of electronic devices.
Thank
Okay?
you, Your Honor.
Thank you. If there's nothing else to be brought up under the discussion portion of the agenda, we move on now to the second public comment period under the Open Meetings Act. Any citizen may come forward at this time, make comment or question to City Council. This public comment period will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record. Excuse me.
Mary Hess. And one thing about not being on council anymore, I can say it appears, and it appears as a good clarifier. It appears to me that the 425 is a sweetheart deal, for a start. It appears that the attorneys on both sides have gotten together, and the township's gotten together with an agreement with River Ridge. It appears that the former attorney called the people living in River Ridge liars when they talked about the water, the rust, the smell. It appears that there's a lot of problems here. And I don't hear a lot of, and I'm sorry that these people had been going through this for years. I've lived here since 55, and that's a long time. And I still don't expect anybody to pay my taxes. And as far as I'm concerned, why don't you put this issue on the ballot? Why don't you let the people of the city decide what they want to do with their growth? We were told, and this is a fact, that if at any time River Ridge Mobile Home Park has problems with their water or sewer, the city shall, no question, the state will make sure the city shall provide it with water and sewer, because they will not let them be without. Now, if this 425 and the waters, that means we shall be also helping those people. But as far as River Ridge, that is a given. Thank you.
Are there additional citizen comments? Please.
Eric Grossman. Earlier, obviously, 3 minutes is not much time to throw out material, and I do want to clarify that I approve of the 425, but having worked in the water department for decades for the city, I can tell you that there are going to be issues with people, this group having a certain quality of water and this group having a different quality of water. And I look at the water and sewer fund like a bank, and just the tap-in fees alone for that development are going to be over $2 million that would go to the city, that won't go to the city. Then there's the ongoing revenue that the water and sewer produces, and all that is going into someone else's bank and not the city's bank. So in 5 or 10 years, when they vote to come in perhaps with just the water, is the city's not going to have any banked money from this development to hook them up and upgrade the system, because it's going to somebody else. So there are a lot of things that are tied into this. For instance, they'll pay tap-in fees to River Ridge. The city will then charge them tap-in fees again if they go from River Ridge to the city. Plus, River Ridge is going to be stuck with a bigger capacity plant with less people on it. So they're either going to have to keep paying them money to help maintain that bigger plant and pay the city, or they're going to get off the River Ridges and they'll have extra capacity and they'll look for other places in the township to fill that capacity up, and you'll lose that property to the township. So there are a lot of overlapping things that I think you need to look at in combining our lack of sewer capacity with that plant may be a good way of enhancing the city's sewer capacity and having control over how it operates to city standards. It is directly upwind. You really want control or the ability to have them run it to a city standard and not a state. So, you know, if you have any questions, you know, feel free to ask me. I'm here to help. Just don't do it electronically, of course. So, you know, that's all I have. And thanks, Mary, for the use of your podium.
Thank you, Mr. Grossman. Are there additional citizen comments?
Well, good evening. Tony Caparisi with Swisher Commercial. Probably in the last 3.5, going on 4 years, I've attended more city council, city planning, commission meetings with the city manager, city attorneys than I have in the last 20 years since my wife and I and family have been residents here in Saline, acting in an official capacity with Swisher Commercial. I just want to say thank you to all of you for all of your diligence and questions and perseverance throughout this entire process, starting with the sale of the 600 North Maple property with the Maple Oaks project, which has come to a conclusion this evening. Also with the Zippy's property in lot 19A. It's been, particularly the Maple Oaks, because it being a PUD, the first for the city, has taken longer than perhaps typical. But I personally have been really impressed with all of council and the way all of the various committees, Gary Rubel and the engineering department, have really moved through some very complex and at times difficult project issues and obstacles to get to the end run here. So again, I want to thank you for all of the time that you've invested in this process. Your city attorney has been outstanding throughout the entire process, and I know really made these projects possible, frankly. The complexities of the city-owned property, the types of projects that are going into these properties, into the parcels, were really facilitated through your city attorney's office, and of course with the cooperation and all of the experience and the cooperation and the legal advisors on the buyer sides as well. So again, on behalf of myself, through Swisher Commercial, I want to thank you for all of your time and effort in getting these projects to completion. We now have bring home lots 18A, lots 20A, and a number of industrial properties that hopefully we'll start to see some activity on in the coming months and years. So again, thank you very much.
Additional citizen comments?
My name is Brian, and Mary's pretty inspiring. And I'd like to expand on Eric's experience and ask y'all to check out the water at River Ridge. Ask the people who live there if they're happy with it. Going to be a lot of your citizens drinking that water and using that water. Ask them about their dishwashers and their sinks and their faucets and just how it works and the troubles that they run into with it. There's no perfect water system, but there are better ones. Thanks.
Thank you. Any additional citizen comments? Well, first of all, Mr. Caparisi, we appreciate those gracious remarks, but it's worth noting for the public record, we also appreciate all your efforts and fortitude and your commitment to helping us not only market but also sell and develop these parcels. We appreciate it very much. And to those who commented on the proposed 425 agreement with Pinnacle Homes for the development of Andalina Farms, as was stated earlier by myself and by a number of members of council as well as by the petitioner, this is a complex and multidimensional issue that requires a lot of thought and care. And I would also note for the public record that at tonight's meeting and at the work meeting we had on this subject, not one person ever acknowledged that there were potential ramifications and pitfalls with pursuing this. And it is somewhat of a minefield, and that's why we're trying to carefully navigate and be very thoughtful, while also at the same time being cognizant of the fact that the city ought to grow and expand in strategic and very thoughtful ways. So again, we appreciate your remarks. We will revisit this in 2 weeks, and we welcome you to join us at that council meeting to be part of our discussion and to comment if that is your wish. We have no absences this evening. I would note upcoming meetings that are enumerated on your agenda, and unless there's anything else to be brought forward at this time, the chair would entertain a motion to adjourn at 9:29.
So moved?
Moved by Gearba. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilwoman Dillon. All those in favor of adjourning signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it. This meeting is adjourned.